developed and managed because we still have a stake in it. We can't keep doing the one-off quick fixes. We have to find revenue sources that are going to be sustainable and that we can grow so that 87% of the taxes aren't coming off of the residents, you know, in residential taxes, in that residential tax base. Next. So we still have some ARPA funds that we are using, and we still have this year the Director of Economic Development, which is coming out of the ARPA funds, because you want to use those ARPA funds as economic generators so that they can be sustainable on their own. We want them to be able to fund themselves in future years after ARPA. We restored 5 police and firefighters in 2022, so we have that budgeted. In the building department, as we continue to look to increase their revenue, we did not have any funded plan examiners in the city of Mount Vernon when I arrived here. That you don't do that. If you don't have people who are dedicated to plan examinations, how do you examine plans? We have a bifurcated approach. We will be going outside and contracting with outside agencies like New Rochelle and Rye and Yonkers, especially on larger projects. But we will also have our plan examiners in-house, paid for by ARPA funds, to take care of residential, small commercial business projects. Plan room coordinator to improve the workflow. We have our housing and economic empowerment manager. That individual is going to work around our tenant-based rental assistance programs as well as our mayors for guaranteed income. Those are HUD funded as well as ARPA funded programs. And we have $750,000 in the budget this year. We didn't use the $500,000 in ARPA monies that we budgeted last year on zombie homes because we had to go through the proper legal proceedings, but we are at the place now where we're ready to tear down, I believe, about 4, and then I believe we have about 10 identified. Zombie homes are those abandoned homes, those homes that have been burnt out by fire, the ones where people are, what do you call that? Squatting in the houses, rodents and raccoons and everything are living. They take away from the safety of a neighborhood, they take away from the public health of the neighborhood, and we are able to use ARPA funds for that. And so we are working to pull those houses together to have them declared unsafe and dangerous by our building commissioner, passed by the city council, and torn down. This summer, we did spend a lot of time with some temporary workers that we hired through DPW to go around and address quite a few of these abandoned properties where the overgrowth was just so dangerous. And it has improved the quality of life in those neighborhoods for now, and that is something we will continue to do, but we will also be putting liens on those property owners' homes for the cleaning up of their property. And if we're tearing down people's property that is not the city, which are most of the properties that we will have to tear down, and going again through the proper legal process, right? Because we did not go through the proper legal process in the past. and one of the delays that we had right now in contracting with companies is they were saying, you know, we still haven't been paid for the homes that we tore down before. And so a lot of what we're doing right now in the city of Mount Vernon is rebuilding our credibility with our vendors, rebuilding our credibility with county, state, and federal agencies and businesses and partners. And guess what? Working to rebuild our credibility with the residents and the taxpayers. Because what you have said is you continue to increase taxes, but you're not seeing the change at the rate that you want to see in the community. And that is very frustrating. And trust me, it's frustrating for me not to be able to produce it as quickly as you would like it to, and I would like to see it. But we have a lot of still inside challenges with vendors and with partners. And so I see we have a question over here. Hold on, do we have anything else? Let me just see.
Mayor, Sylvia Tyree.
Ms. Tyree?
Yeah, let me ask you something. The property that the city owns, where it's overgrown, who takes care of that? Because there's some property they're telling me that's owned by the city, and it is horrible the way it looks. So what do I have to do? Call DPW to see if they can go and cut that property down?
Absolutely.
It is disgusting.
You would call DPW. So I believe about a week and a half ago, and our Commissioner Bush could comment on that. There was a property over on 13th Avenue that we realized was city-owned, and we had gotten some complaints from residents. And we went over, and it was so bad. I mean, the garbage all around the property was probably, about 4 or 5 feet high? And we did an external contractor came in and to a rate of $10,000. So the city-owned properties are supposed to be maintained by the comptroller's office.
Oh, I have to call the control.
Hold on, no, we can call DPW, but in 2020 and in 2021, when we had an old comptroller and we were trying to manage those properties and they had money in their budget for that, there's a line item for maintenance of city-owned properties. We couldn't have any conversations with her, so DPW would go out periodically and do what they could, but even then, we were buying, plywood out of our own pockets. And we were buying plywood out of our own pockets, as well as out of inaugural funds and things of that nature, because we couldn't access the money in the comptroller's office. And so that's what I said this summer. I don't know, and Damani, you need to get me a report on that, but we did quite a few homes throughout the city of Mount Vernon, and we will be expensing the costs to those property owners as a lien on their property, because we want to be able to recycle that money as well. And the city-owned properties, we are addressing those. We do have a zombie coordinator that is working with us on city properties, residential private-owned properties, and LLC and bank-owned properties.
Just 2 questions, Mayor. What does IDA mean? I know you threw it around.
IDA is the Industrial Development Agency.
Okay.
It is like the Urban Renewal Agency and the Board of Water Supply. They're not city departments, but they are municipal authorities that work on behalf of the city.
Okay. And is there some type of grant that we can get to build up 3rd Street and 4th Avenue, that block, to do something with it?
So through our Urban Renewal Agency, we have applied for CDFA funds through the state of New York. We've put in a $3 million grant application recently to do some upgrades and streetscape and investments in the 4th Avenue as well as the 3rd Street area in those corridors. So we are now trying to also build up our grant writing team. For many years, you had one person in the city, Steve Lawrence, who was writing grants for 22 departments, right? When you don't have an infrastructure, it's hard for you to go out and compete for monies. And so now that there are trillions of dollars of federal monies coming down to the states and trickling to the cities, we want to make sure that we're in position. So we did have a new grants writer start today, Mr. Lauren Pluth, who has lots of experience in grant writing, especially for capital needs and community improvements, and is also has a background in architecture, and so that kind of helps when you have some expertise with that. Yes, Mr. Malloy?
Yes. Once again, the supermarkets, and when I come into Mount Vernon, I want to feel that this is Mount Vernon. So in a way is the stores, they have everything on. They can't be uniform, like maybe all the canopies, all burgundy, everybody can say, oh, we are in Mount Vernon.
And that's what we're looking to do with these
And not
grant
only that,
applications.
when you go to supermarkets, if somebody's getting robbed or something, you can't see. They got boxes all over. They got pictures all over the place. Why it just can't be clear so the people on the outside could see what's going on the inside? Thank God it ain't happened here yet. But you can't see nothing in none of these stores. Everything looks so
And-
all over the place.
And so we also recently, in the past few months, also hired code enforcement officers, right? Because that's what didn't happen in Mount Vernon. You didn't have code enforcement officers. I believe you had one that was hired through the Urban Renewal Agency using grant funds and located in the building department. But 9 times out of 10, when those code enforcement officers wrote a violation, oftentimes because of politics and people given to campaigns, they were told, oh, tear up that ticket because that building owner, that homeowner, that business owner was able to call to the mayor's office or another elected official and say, I donated and you gave me a ticket, don't do it, right? And so that's been a problem. The exception has always been more of the rule in Mount Vernon than the rule being the rule. And so we have new code enforcement officers. They are finishing and finalizing all of their certifications, and I'm already getting complaints because they're fining people, right? And I'm like, but if your property's not in the position that it's supposed to be, then those fines are going to stay. Because we cannot allow businesses to come in and not have a standard and continue to tear down Mount Vernon, right? Again, it has to be about respect. If our money is good enough to spend in your in your store, then your money, our community, is good enough for you to spend in our community to make sure that your business looks like a similar business that you would own in another community. And that just has not been the standard in Mount Vernon for a long time. And so we are working with, most of those properties are owned by people who rent them out. And so we are working to get grant money to help them bring their properties up to compliance, but also enforce rules and regulations here in the city of Mount Vernon. Mr. McDonough?
First, thank you for this. This has been really wonderful. And I appreciate the hard work that you do. You've been dealt a very difficult hand. There's no doubt we're kind of behind. We're in a bind here. We really are not able to bond. Kind of slow growth in terms of positive revenue development. 4 things I just want to quickly say, and I know the controller's gone, so one of them you may not be able to say much about. But the first is the budget format seems kind of tired to me, and I think it could use some updating.
So based on our conversation earlier,
Yeah.
we're going to we'll insert a row.
That would be
So
great.
that we can see actuals for the first time in many, many years.
Excellent.
And we can have that out before the next budget hearing.
Beautiful.
Well,
That's
the budget hearing happens on the 13th.
Right, I understand. But going forward, that would be a great thing to add. Also, if there can be an option for the budget to be downloaded in a spreadsheet instead of just a PDF, that would be awesome. That would be great.
Then that would allow for residents to manipulate lock cells in something that is a city property.
Well-
and we can't do that. Then we would lose control of the budget format, and people could end up putting any type of budget out that they chose to.
Well, look, you
and
can do
confuse
that
people.
now. I mean, I download the budget into PDF and convert it into a spreadsheet so that I can then run analytics on it. The problem is your different departments use spreadsheets differently. So it comes out all wonky, and it's just a tedious exercise to have to get it formatted so I can then do it. So people can do that now. It's not you're preventing anybody from doing that. It just makes it more difficult. A lot of agencies, state of New York, I go there to look at sales tax data. I can download it as a spreadsheet. They're not worried that I'm going to change that information. If I do that, then that's on me, and I'll get caught because you own the property. So we don't need to go back and forth, but something to consider. It would make it easier for people like myself who like to look at the numbers and like to do comparisons. It's easier to do it in a worksheet. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, and
That's
I think
our management services
thank
commissioner.
you. If you refresh the format, maybe adding a few more details like full-time equivalent employees by department, stuff like that. You can glean that, but it takes work to do it. You got your HR people could throw those numbers right in there. It would be helpful. And then this is a little pet peeve. There's one department, it's called the Developmentally Disabled Program. That could be updated. That language is a little bit dated. Maybe the program for people
We'll
with
put
developmental
Rose Simon.
disabilities.
We could just call it the Rose Simon program, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
it is.
That for me, it's a little bit old school. So that's the first thing. The second thing, the revenue for 2022. I was looking at the controllers quarterly through September. It looks like if you strip out prior year property taxes, we're still on pace to exceed the $137 million budget. So it looks like there's going to be about $142 million in revenue, which means there's going to be an excess of about $4 million over the budget, assuming the adopted budget comes in on target.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens to that? If you end up generating more revenue than you needed for the budget, does that go into the fund balance, or what do you do with it?
So if we go all the way back to the beginning of the spreadsheet, like I said, we've already paid, let me see here. We have already paid, go back, all the way back, back, up, go up. So we, in 2022, we will already have paid $2 million in 456 back money.
Okay, so any excess is going to just pay
The
down
excess is
prior
gonna help
period
that-
obligations.
Yeah, the
Got
prior
it.
period obligations.
Yeah, okay. The assessed valuation, is that accurate? It seems
It's
like
the
it's
first time since 2006 that it's gone up.
okay.
So you can go all the way forward. And because we were going to get to those, so let me just get to those real quick. So this is the assessed valuation. As you could see, it's gone down every year from $1 million to $2 million. So in 2006, we were valued at $165 million. In 2022, we were at $146 million. So when I
seems
talk
low.
about those certiaries,
Yeah.
and I talk about people being able to challenge, and the thing with the certiaries, people can apply now for certiaries going back 7-8 years.
Right.
Right? And so it's really, really hard to fight against that because they can apply at any time and go back as far as they want. So it's hard to budget for that, and that's why we put an increase of $300,000 in for the certiaries, because if we don't pay them timely, then again, 9% interest
compounds,
on
yeah,
those.
yeah.
But I have to say, if there is one bit, just 1/2 milligram of good news in this budget, is that in 2023, 146 million, 917, as compared to last year, 145 million, 621. So we have increased our valuation. Lots of people say, do a reval. I don't, that's going to cost us a few $1 million
Sure.
to do.
No.
It's going to raise some people's taxes. It's going to decrease some people's
no, it's a
taxes.
complicated
But it's not something that's
problem.
going to be done
Yeah.
in the next 12 months.
What about the constitutional tax limit? Is that going to be released? It's that for a few years it hasn't appeared in the budget. How close we are to the constitutional tax limit?
So we've had to override the levy.
Okay.
Right, we've had to override the levy, but there is a formula, and
Yeah.
the comptroller can release that formula and show what it is, because it's not just 2%. 2% is kind of the average, but we have
Right.
passed.
I think we're secure. We're not near that 90% breach. So I think we're okay, but we just want to watch that. And then the last thing about future revenue opportunities, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of monopolizing things here, but the
If
first
you have some
one.
ideas, I want to hear them.
Well, so the non-residential employee tax, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of any sort of taxes. They seem just sort of coercive, these types of taxes. And also I worry about, maybe there are some rich people who are coming in and working in the city, but there probably are some working class people as well. And I worry about burdening people with more taxes, and also maybe discouraging people from saying, I'm not going to go into Mount Vernon because I don't want to get taxed just for going in there, because they do add value. If people come in and they work here, they conceivably are spending money here as well. So just something to think about. And then in terms of the IDA, I'm fairly suspicious of the value of an IDA. One thing that might be cool is to reframe it as like an EDA, right? An environmental development agency, where we really focus on incentivizing businesses that are going to attack the major problem we have with a collapsing ecosystem, and sort of really building back the city of homes, like building greenery around the city and encouraging companies who are willing to partner with us to do that. So anyway, that's all.
And so one thing that we've done, thank you so much for your input, and I will definitely take, and I know we were taking notes on that, and our IDA compliance director is here right now. We've redone our tax code, our taxing code for the IDA. So it's the first time that that's been done, and it's transparent, and there's also a real expectation of anyone that's coming in to do development to provide community benefit, right? And community benefit, whether it's an investment in infrastructure, an investment in workforce and economic development, an investment in environmental justice and greening and storm hardening and or youth services, green spaces. So those are things that we have built into the IDA right now going forward, as well as any property. If they say they're going to have 20 kids and we see they have 25 kids, then they automatically have to pay the extra for those 5 kids, and that will be tracked. And that's one of the things that the school district has been complaining about for a long time. So we took all of that into consideration, and we have contracted with a financial and economist who will do cost-benefit analysis on any project that comes before the IDA, which helps to inform us of our decision as to the benefit of that project or the cost to the city. Yes. How are you, ma'am?
I'm sorry, that there's a limit on the quality of the stores they have in Mount Vernon, specifically 99-cent stores, hair, beauty stores. I know that you want to bring in other types of stores, but can we limit those stores that do come in?
Director Mack, she's waving back there, because this is a conversation that we've been having.
This is a conversation we've been having since this administration took office in 2020. And how we are addressing it is hand in hand with the comprehensive plan. We are implementing a moratorium on certain types of businesses where we have an overabundance to ensure that the work done under the comprehensive plan will allow us to focus on those particular retailers or restaurants that the city is desirous of and recruit them accordingly. But we're also going to be asking for the help of the residents so that we do go out and recruit the type of businesses that we want to see here. So look forward to the announcement on the moratorium.
And we also have some ARPA monies that we will be using, like we're doing guaranteed income for some residents. We will have monies that we're giving to not-for-profits, but also monies that will come in for competitive grants for businesses. And the monies will be given to the businesses that we're lacking, like the type of businesses that we want to recruit into Mount Vernon. So there's money for maintenance and startup, but there's also money for beautification for those business corridors as well that we'll be utilizing. Mr. Eberman?
But before we go, I know that it's almost 8, so I know she had like 2 or 3 more slides left. I think let's let the mayor get through the last little bit of the presentation, and then we'll open it up for these
Sure.
3 other questions.
So this just really quickly, and then I'm gonna come back to the last 2. Next slide. So, fund balance. If you could look, we're going all the way back to 2006. In 2006, the tax rate increase, that's the red line, was about 3.5%, but the fund balance that was available to balance that budget and deliver a 3.5% tax increase was $7 million. Mount Vernon has never balanced its budget. It's always depended on the fund balance to keep the taxes low. So you could look at 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10 went up again, 11, 12, 13. Pay special attention to 2014 and 15, where there was no fund balance. The tax increase was 8%, right? We go back to 2019 and 2020, no fund balance, tax increases we kept low, but we just didn't have information also really about what the fund balance was. And even when we projected a use of the fund balance, that wasn't necessarily savings or a reserve that was in the city at that time. We literally calculated how much we had already spent on payroll by the day that we would be passing the budget, and we put it in to the fund balance and just projected that use. We said, we've already spent this money, so it's here. it's here before we've collected $1 of revenue. We've already spent that money, so it's there somewhere, and we just put it in there. Instead of at that time saying, because if we didn't do that, then we would have been projecting at that time, instead of a 3% tax increase, we would have been projecting more like that's $2 million. So that's 4 more percent. It would have been more like a 6 to 6.5% tax increase. And so there is a direct correlation between fund balance and taxable rates. There's a direct correlation, and it's sitting there right in front of you. So, anything else there? Let me see, I think that might be the last one. This is the last slide. So that's no fund balance to use, no ability to bond, and lots of legacy debt caused by, entering into contracts, reopening contracts, and there's still more to go because we still have not addressed CSCA's reopening requests going back to 2013. We have not given CSCA or the Teamsters or the police department a contract and increases since 2017. So it's not over. But that's why that $4.1 million that we have in this budget this year, that next year, because it's in the budget now, that next year we'll be able to speak to the contracts for police in 2024, for police, for CSCA, and for Teamsters, because those still have to be addressed going back. But what we've been projecting is a forward increase as opposed to a retro. When people say stop the bleeding, you stop the bleeding going forward, but we cannot afford $10 million without a fund balance and without the ability to bond going backwards. Yes, it's hurtful. Yes, it makes people angry, but at the same time, I don't think that I could even propose a 25% increase to be able to start addressing some of those issues on a cash basis. So, Mr. Eberman and
Mr. Monroe had a question over here too, as he's been waiting.
Ms. Covey? Ms. Hogans? Oh, okay, Mr. Monroe?
Thank you, Mayor. So I appreciate that we're having this opportunity for dialogue. And every year I have the same question, and it's going to keep happening till I get some answers. So I'm wondering if the page 34 expense for public access studio expenses as it's itemized, which is proposed for this year for $10,000 and was adopted for $10,000
It will
last
be
year
spent.
and previous years. I'm curious as to what that expense was made on, since we do
So-
not have a public access
So
studio.
we have communications and we have IT here. So we are in the process of, because we have open law meetings now. So it's not necessarily public access because we're not using the public access as much, but we have to wire the building and the different meeting rooms so that we can project, so that we can air the different public meetings such as this, but city council meetings, board of estimate meetings, things of that nature. We also went last week. You want to speak to that, sir? Mr.
Hi, Tim
Allen.
Allen, Director of Communications. So we did do a walkthrough at the Mount Vernon High School cable access studio. And so we did a walkthrough to see what the necessary needs were in terms of fiber optics, spectrum, and then the upgrading of equipment and what that partnership with the school district would look like. And so we are looking to, sit down and talk about different creative solutions as it relates to making sure that we, in 2023, that we do go back onto cable public access. So that is a great question. So thank you for that.
So we've already identified about $20,000 worth of equipment that we have to purchase to make the cable access channel, the city's cable access channel. Hold on, that will make this, Mr. Monroe, I'm also answering your question. So we've already, okay, but can you listen to my response first before the follow-up question?
The response actually requires clarification before anything you say can be valid. If you have an actual schematic assessment of public access studios, transmission, or broadcast or even production facilities, I would think then you could have expenditure on any semi-professional equipment,
Yes, and that's what we said.
transmission,
We've already
wiring, or whatever.
identified some
A
of the
schematic
costing.
assessment would be necessary first. That's the most basic opportunity that
And
you
that's
should
what he
actually
did
afford
last
the
week.
community. The community should have, cable access is in fact public access, not governmental.
Absolutely.
The
but
priority
right now,
is public, and then educational, and then governmental. Because the
Absolutely.
community should benefit from the existing infrastructure, not just the expenditure at the behest of government. I appreciate that you're doing this and that we're benefiting from this in some way, but the priority, the actual preface for public access should be an infrastructure so that the public voice can be expressed, and reciprocally, government can respond. But in
Right.
that sense, why are we spending money
So
to
again,
do something when you haven't had an assessment?
So again, if you could allow me to answer the question, because you did the same question, right? So I'm already aware of what your question is. You did this at the meeting at the Doles recently. And so we assessed for the short run how we can get the cable access channel going so that we can get information up. But the long-term desire, the desire is to bring the cable access channel out of the high school and back into the community, a center like the Dole Center, so that the community could also have access and give community voice, give education, and provide government access at the same time. And so we are aligned on our desire to bring it back. But right now, we have a cable access channel, and we're broadcasting everything over Facebook or YouTube or the CMVN website, right? When we have a lot of people, especially our seniors or those who are kind of shut in, who have cable, but there is no sound on the Mount Vernon City channel, and it has not been. So the first thing that we're going to do is address the low-hanging fruits, and that is making sure that we restore the sound so that we could get information out through that. The second step would be to return that cable station back to a community-operated station, as you have discussed. And so you're on the Cable Advisory Board. You can continue to have that conversation. We're going to take, hold on, we had, and that's why we're trying to get the sound back up over an engineered. Okay. We have consultants. We have consultants. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, for having this forum. Not really a question, more of a statement. As we still look at this fund balance slide, you know, I do a lot of work around the county. I know the county has in the past utilized the fund balance to get to a 0% tax increase. In this year's New Rochelle budget, they have proposed in that budget $6 million from the fund balance. I think that'll probably return $3 million of that. So that's why, Chris McDonough, you have that 1 point and change, because they're using $6 million from the fund balance, as little as $3 million. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And, you know, while we're waiting for the mic to get up here, people have asked, what about the ARPA dollars? ARPA dollars in other communities, we received about almost $41 million in ARPA dollars, right? ARPA dollars in the communities around us are going to enhance those communities. The ARPA dollars in our community have gone to save it and allow us to provide basic services, to purchase police cars, to purchase garbage trucks, to purchase street sweepers, all of which we were borrowing from Yonkers, from New York City, from other smaller communities. We had no garbage trucks, no police cars. You know, people can't say, get the policemen police cars, and then at the same time say, oh, use the ARPA money to give people a raise or to do this or that. The ARPA monies had to go and take care of what Mount Vernon did not do in the last 20 years, and that is have a capital projects board and create a capital budget. We have not done that, and so our ARPA dollars did not go necessarily to enhance the community. It went so that we could have a fleet of cars to be able to deliver a lot of the services. It went to pay for infrastructure needs and speak to the Department of Justice consent decree and us having to put some funding towards it. And so I would have loved to use $41 million for enhancements, but we've had to use $41 million to provide basic services and to do the digitalization and buy new servers because our servers were 20 years old and crashing. So that's just some of where the ARPA monies have gone.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. My name is Monica Whiting Hogans, and I just want to go back to the cost savings where we were talking about the conversation about the medical insurance, where I'm going to say that I'm an advocate where employees should pay into that because that is the way of the world. I've worked for Fortune 500 companies where we did start off where everything was, free, but then the bottom line was being hemorrhaged because they were absorbing this cost. So if it's something that you all could really consider, also giving the employees maybe an FSA to offset some of those costs because that'll be a tax break for them as far as, those things. But if we could really just consider looking at that part as a cost savings, because that is something, it's the way of the world where nothing is free anymore. And as much as it may be a hardship for those who've never paid into it, it's something that they're going to have to start looking into because there aren't too many companies anymore that are giving that benefit. So I would appreciate, and I also want to say thank you again for having this opportunity to have a conversation.
Thank you. And thank you. And, having been a CEO even in the not-for-profit, we went from a 15% pay-in to a 25% pay-in to a 30% pay-in. But the one thing that we also haven't done, you usually do that in the midst of contract negotiation, and we haven't given a contract or had those type of contract negotiations since the contracts ended in 2017. And so when we add and we say you're going to have to pay 15 or 25% in, we can't do that and have not also given them a contract for 5 years. So we're looking at how, like you said, how we can offset some of that and say, look, this will, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but at the same time, it allows them to get higher salaries, which will impact their retirement. But at the same time, it will allow us as the city to have savings on the medical insurance benefits. And yes, we do have, for the first time in many years in the city of Mount Vernon, a dedicated staff benefits coordinator who is handling that and managing that, not just someone who's enrolling people, but someone who is shopping for, someone who is purging the rolls. We had people on our medical that left the city 5-10 years ago, and we've been carrying that. And so this year, within the past more so like 7 months, the comptroller's office, and working with his staff and working some with HR, has been able to go through line by line. And then we're also looking at offering some type of benefit for those who don't need to take the insurance, right? Because if you're, at my husband's job, if he didn't take his insurance, he got $500 a month. Well, when his insurance company was paying $3,100 a month for a family medical plan, that saved them $2,600 a month. That's a real savings. And so those are the things that we are absolutely looking at. Because it's not like you can do coordination of benefits in the way you used to before. So Mount Vernon really needs to find an incentive to cause our employees not to utilize our insurance if they have another primary source outside the city. And especially when you have couples who are working for the city, we're doubly insuring them. Mr. Eberman?
Madam Mayor, just as a side note, I have to say I'm sharing the frustration with Mr. Monroe about this anti-cable advisory business. I served on the board, and I did not continue to serve after my term right now, exactly because of situations like this, right? I was on there for a year. We were ignored by the city. We actually went in there. We wrote an entire assessment that was shared with the city. We never got a response. Now you went there, did an assessment, which is laudable, but clearly the chair of the Cable Advisory Board wasn't part of it, had never heard of that. So that is why people don't want to serve on boards anymore, right? So question for
Just to clarify, what year did you go in and do this assessment?
Yes, Absolutely.
I said, what year?
What year? Last year.
You did it in last year? You
Yes,
did
and
in
it was shared with your administration.
Okay.
And that doesn't matter that the city and, of course, the Cable Advisory Board need to work together. But if you basically do that stuff, you throw it, you don't even get an email back, and then later you guys go and do your own assessment, and you don't even share it with the chair of the Cable Advisory Committee.
It was done last week.
No, I understand that he should have been part of that and known about it beforehand, right? I mean, this is why we have a Cable Advisory Board. Anyway, this is why I didn't want to serve on it anymore, because exactly of situations like that, because it's frustrating. In terms of the non-residential employee tax, coming back to the budget. So you're listing Yonkers and New York City.
I said New York City gave up that tax. It was what they had historic,
Exactly.
and they are trying to get it back.
That is correct, right?
So, but Yonkers does have it.
Absolutely, right? But both of those cities also have a residential employment tax, right? So I'm not sure, I'm just wondering if you can make a commitment that this doesn't just become another employment tax that is piled on everybody. I don't know if our esteemed corporation council here, has it ever actually been done that you only impose employment taxes of people who are non-residents? I've never heard of that before.
Well, that's why we're really working with the state, because
All right.
this has to go through state legislation.
But my
So it's
concern
not-
is that this is going to be because these two cities also have a residential employment tax, right?
That's
so
why we're
I'm a little bit
exploring it.
concerned that then suddenly, like, well, now we're just going to give it to everybody, would just be another tax, right?
It's all an exploratory format right now. We have to look at options. We have to look at what we can be able to discern from it. And these are the last two questions, please.
Okay. Thomas
We still
Keller.
have tomorrow night, and you also have on the 13th. So tomorrow, feel free to come to Centennial, and on the 13th is the official Board of Estimate hearing, where I don't get to respond, I just get to listen.
Very busy week for me. There's a school board meeting tomorrow night. There's a redistricting meeting in White Plains at 5 o'clock, so forth. But anyway, the business about the fund balance and tax rate. Let's all go back to Ernie and Maureen. Ernie was there from 95 to 07, and then 11 to 15. 16 years. 16, is it working?
It's on.
It does, if you speak.
Okay. Maureen was there from 93 to 17. Almost every year, Ernie would propose, say, an 8% tax rate increase. Maureen would come in and say, we can knock that down to 4% because we have a fund balance and so forth. It's a big trick. The thing was, people were overtaxed, and that money should be credited back to the citizens in the next fiscal year rather than lowering the tax rate of the budget. Non-employment tax. People talk about New York City hasn't had this since Pataki administration. He convinced Shelley Silver, the late Shelley Silver, and Joe Bruno, head of the Senate, to get rid of the tax, the commuter tax. So this goes back, Pataki was in until 06 from, 94 or whatever. This goes back a long ways. Now, Yonkers. Before you get enthralled with Yonkers, their sales tax is 8 7/8, ours is 8 3/8. The transfer tax on real estate, it's almost as much as New York City. It's about a 1.5%. The rest of Westchester County is 1 or 1.25. Let's see, transfer tax. So if you work in Yonkers, whether you live there or whether you live outside of Yonkers, you're paying an income tax. So when Yonkers says our residential property taxes are lower than other parts of the county, they don't tell you about the other three things that I just told you. Let's see. How about going to a 40-hour work week for people instead of a 35-hour week? The employees for, the secretarial people, I don't know, it may apply to all four unions, but how about a 40-hour work week, 8:30 to 4:30? And I have the same problem with the school board, too. In the private industry, it's a 40-hour week. Government, nonprofits, it's a 35-hour week. What do they got, a half an hour for lunch, 2 15-minute breaks? Comes out to be like a six-hour day. As far as not being able to bond, I mentioned this in 20 and 21, not last year. Governor Cuomo had a plan, And Astorino administration took advantage of this because one year they get hit with a huge increase in pensions, something like 100 million. I'm not sure of the number, but I think they ended up borrowing about 40 million from the state at about 1% or 1 plus 1%, 2%. I know interest rates are much higher now than they were then, and I don't know if that plan is still in effect, but it was specific for pensions and other. It may be applicable to the money that you owe the school district, the 11.7. Lawrence Soul was a budget director for Astorino for 8 years. George Latimer thought so highly of him that he kept him on. He's still the budget director. And I referred people, you and others, to him. I don't think you followed up. So that's an opportunity. On the zombie homes, isn't it better to sell those if the
You can't sell them if you don't own them. Most of them we don't own. There are almost 250 zombie homes in Mount Vernon, and we own less than 5% of them. So they are residentially owned, they are LLC owned, and we've been able to track that, and we have the information on that, but they're not owned by the city. There are very few properties.
But I thought you could
which are
take
owned
possession
by
of
the
them on a
city.
tax lien. If they don't owe any money to a bank, they owe money to the city.
So you have a controller who did not do in-rem on properties in the 4 years that she was in office. And so the last in-rem list that we have that was done was, I believe, 2016. 2016. And so we are moving forward with the in-rem process. We had a person who sat in that office for 4 years and didn't do their job because they didn't know what they were doing. So, you know, it's not like we have been able to take benefit of the people who were behind in 2016. You have to wait 2 years, and that would have been 2018. The former controller did nothing in 2018, 19, 20, and 21. And so now we have to go all the way back, and that is what we're doing between the controller and the Corporation Counsel's office. The second thing you had asked about, contacting the state for a low interest loan. We've been having those conversations with the state controller, with the assistant state, or the deputy state controller, as well as with our state legislators, because our state legislators also have to sign off and help push for that. We asked for about $25 million. Why? Because we owed them $27 million in health insurance. So, I mean, we would have borrowed from them just to pay them back, really, for health insurance, but we were denied that. And so we have not been able to get that from them. As of this time, we are working with the state, and hopefully now that the governor has had an election and is not kind of offering and operating in an interim term, and the others are focusing on kind of forward governance, we are going back to the state and having more conversations with them, also including finding a way to address the 5 years of no contract with the police and our badge drain.
Yeah,
So we did hear your advice, and we did follow up on your advice, and so I just wanted you to be sure that we're leaving no stone unturned. We're
So-
looking for money under every rock.
Yeah, so there's big liabilities with the school district, with the retro payments to the unions, and other things. And if you can
And
do
just to confirm again what the controller said in speaking with the school district, since the school district has become the tax collector, they're responsible for collecting their taxes and not the city. And I guess maybe that's something that they didn't research thoroughly before they made that decision. But they are the tax collector of record, and so we do not have to make them whole on those years as we have researched to date. Now, if something changes, then we'll address that, but they are the tax collector of record.
Well, I know they are, but Ken Silver, the chief financial officer, he disagrees with Controller Morton on this, and I guess it's going to be decided in the courts.
Because right now, the state is agreeing with us, and it's the same state office that oversees municipal and school finances. So right
Okay.
now, they became the tax collector. They have to collect their taxes, and we have to still make them whole on the 11.7.
Okay.
Last question.
the
I've been on my
last
feet for over
question.
2 hours.
Yeah. Did I hear you say that you was anticipating imposing a 7% tax increase on us poor seniors?
That, ma'am, that's the tax percentage that we are at in the draft estimate of the budget at this time.
Okay.
And we still have time that we're
To
gonna,
negotiate
like we
that.
said, it was about 4% before last Monday when we got a $3 million additional bill. So we were right around, hovering around that 4%, and then that came in. And so that's what pushed us. And we could not continue to wait. We had to release the budget, because the longer we wait to release the budget, the longer it's going to take for the budget to pass, the longer it's going to take for us to
Right.
be able to send out bills and bring revenue into the city. And so we had to release the imperfect draft budget, right? That's why the first one you do is a draft estimate, and then you go and you have a hearing, and then you go back and you put more of a final estimate, and then you pass that to the council, and then the council has another crack at that budget and at reducing it. But right now, this is the first draft
Well,
of
I
the
hope
budget.
that's not the right draft, but thank you.
Absolutely. We are working to reduce that number. Yes. Okay, so everyone, I want to thank you so much for coming out. Just to remind you, and we're doing this, like again, we're doing this because we're not running. Hold on one second. We chose to have this meeting tonight, and we're having the meeting tomorrow at Centennial at the same time, because this is where we can have dynamic conversation and we can answer questions. Whereas at the budget hearing on the 13th, which will be next Tuesday, that'll just be time where I hear, right? So we're not hiding behind a Board of Estimate meeting. We're coming out into the community so that we could have that dynamic conversation with the community and answer questions. So thank you so much, and please follow up. And we have town hall meetings. The next town hall meeting outside of the budget will also be on December 15th at Vernon Heights Congregational Church. So that's not necessarily a budget meeting, but we can talk about potholes and sewers and services, and our commissioners will be there to answer questions that you have, and we'll continue to have town hall meetings in all sectors of the city to engage the public. So thank